Hey guys, so I actually meant to do this video last night, and I was going to do it on George Groves versus Fedor Chutinov, and I started watching it, and I just assumed, because I remember watching him knock that guy out on the Spence undercard, I just assumed that he kind of beat that guy, you know, very easily in the early rounds. I know there were some questionable points in the fight, but I wasn't like super watching it. I don't remember exactly what I was doing at the time, but I just remember him knocking him out. So I did the film study on that fight, and George Groves just got beat from pillar to post. You know, like most of the fight, he just wasn't doing a lot. He was getting, you know, battered when he was on the line with his opponent, you know, which is exactly something I said in the Eubanks fight, that he just cannot stay on the line with Eubanks. That athleticism is going to get Groves hurt, and he was just getting smashed, you know. Like, he had some decent counters sometimes, but Chutinov was really getting at him with that jab. And to be honest, from all the tape that I've watched of Groves, and I've watched this fight before too. I watched it on Saturday. And I watched, like I said, I watched Carl. Oh man, I don't know what I told you guys and what I didn't, because I made this whole video with Fedor Chutinov, and I went like through 3 rounds of it, and I was just like, any second now, George Groves is gonna start coming back with that counter, you know. But I watched Carl Froch 1. I watched Badu Jack. I watched a bunch of his fights. You know, definitely his losses. Kind of see how he's changed as a fighter from there, and he's definitely grown a lot since those losses. And what was I gonna say? But so like, there are some interesting things that I think can happen in this fight. So number one, well, let's go ahead and just start playing the fight. I'm gonna put it in slow-mo because I don't get picked up for copyright bullshit when the stuff is at 50%. Unfortunately, at 6.67%, I still get picked up for copyright. But we're just going to kind of watch this, and I'm going to talk a little bit. But I want to focus right now, before we talk about any technique and stuff, I want to focus on George Groves' active guard. Look at how he's here. Look at how hard it's going to be for Eubanks to land his first punch, right? And I talked a lot about this in the fight with, the film study of Eubanks, that Eubanks doesn't set his jab up, right? He just kind of flicks it out there. He's got a great jab, right? As a tool, it's great, but I think he's going to have a hard time landing it against Groves early in the fight because of Groves' active guard, right? Look at how he's constantly moving his head, right? Feinting right here. He's got his guard low. Like, it looks like it's easy to hit him with a shot, right? But he's constantly moving and feinting right there. He's got his active lead hand, boom, and he comes back with that counter. Now, this is the part that I think that Eubanks might have, or Eubank might have. God, I keep calling him Eubanks. I think Eubank might have trouble with this. He doesn't set his jab up, right? Boom, and then Groves is able to come back with that 1-2, right? The reason that I think that that's going to be effective is because Eubank does look to set his punches up off of his jab. He does set it off of some feints later on. He'll come in and feint the jab, and then, you know, bust out with some power punches and stuff. But early in the fight, I expect George Groves to see a significant amount of success countering the jab. The only thing that I don't like is that George Groves always throws a 1-2 off of it. Always throws a 1-2. He never just throws a 2, right? And that kind of shows that he looks to control and find his opponent's head before he throws his second punch, you know. And it's a way of controlling and measuring his right hand so that it has a better chance of landing, right? But it is unfortunate, again, right here, how he shoots a 1-2 first, right? So his opponent comes forward, he's able to get away from the jab easily, counter, and his opponent uses good head movement and then smothers him to not get hit by the 1-2. But I wish that he would throw just a 2, you know, or that he was better at throwing just a 2. I think that'd be much more effective for him. Very similar to Sergey Kovalev and his ability to take away his opponent's jab. But look at this. I really like this from George Groves. Look at how active his guard is, right? Dipping to the left, right? And we call that, I guess that's the inside right here, right? And then ducking down, changing levels on his opponent, feinting him, right? And all of this helps to control his opponent, you know. And there was some talk in the Luis Ortiz fight, a lot of it, the Luis Ortiz video that I did against David Allen, right? And I said that David Allen was controlling Luis Ortiz, and I got a little bit of backlash to that because David Allen, he got pieced up, man. That boy got his ass beat, you know. And I'm not discerning that whether or not he won or lost the fight. I'm only discerning who's in control at the moment, right? And I kind of want to demonstrate that point right here with the active guard, right? Look at every time, so I'm going to try and pause it every time George Groves makes a move, right? So George Groves changes levels. Now his opponent takes a step back, right? He rocks back on his heels, expecting a body shot. He's trying to cushion a body shot, right? That's George Groves controlling Eduard Gutknecht. I'm going to call that boy Ed. We're going to call him Ed. That's George Groves controlling Ed, right? Because Ed might want to be throwing a punch right now. Ed might want to be setting up a jab. Ed might want to be doing this or that, right? But because of the fact that George Groves feints him, he rocks back and tries to cushion a body shot or get out of the way of a body shot, right? And that's him being controlled. Think about it like a video game, right? Where you press A and your opponent does, you know, whatever they do, right? In this case, you press A and now your opponent rocks back, right? Now think about having a 3-minute fight with somebody where you're just constantly button mashing A, bum, 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 and you've just got this 3-minute feint going on, and your opponent, like if it's a video game, right? Your opponent is constantly just rocking back, rocking back, rocking back. You may not have done anything, right? You may not have taken advantage of the control you had, but you were the one causing them to do that, right? And that's the idea behind controlling your opponent, right? There are many ways to do this, but you can do it physically, right? By putting your hand on your opponent's shoulder or on their head, right? Or on their collarbone, or putting your forearm up on their forearm and pinning their gloves to their face, by pulling their glove down so you can punch around their guard, right? There are many ways to physically do it, but you can do it psychologically controlling them as well, creating space with the feints and the other things. And we'll look at some more, right? Again, he feints him again, and what does the opponent do? He backs up, right? He then, whoops, so feints him, he dips back, feints him again, he dips back again, changes level or changes angle right here and slips to the inside. And what does the opponent do? Get into the high guard. And these are all controlling Ed, right? Ed is like, oh shit, he might be doing something right here. I got to watch out for that. And that's all I mean by control, right? Because of the fact that David Allen in that film study doesn't know what to do with the control, he doesn't understand that he's controlling Luis Ortiz. And also, like David Allen said, Luis Ortiz is a bad motherfucker. You don't really want... It's still dangerous, right? He's such an athlete, right? You really got to be controlling him well, you know. Anyway, we're not talking about David Allen and Luis Ortiz. You guys can go back and watch that if you're interested. But that was just to show the point that Deontay Wilder is going to be able to slow Luis Ortiz's offense enough with the feinting and the probing and whatever. But anyway. Here his opponent, Ed, starts coming forward, shoots that jab, and George Groves throws his patented 1-2 combo, boom, and lands a great counter right hand on his opponent. You know, now the only reason that this may not be as successful early is because, what's that boy's name? Chris Eubank. He does a good job of moving off the line. You know, he's got great footwork. Even though I hate that term, you know, people misuse it. I don't think they understand what footwork means, but he moves his feet well. He navigates the ring really well. He transfers his weight really well. He has amazing tools, and he does have the ability to shoot the jab and move off the line at the same time very well and create angles. And that might make it hard for George Groves to kind of counter him early in the fight. Now again, George Groves feinting his opponent, right? He's got that active guard. And remember earlier, he was feinting and changing levels, right? And his opponent was like, oh, he's going to go to the body, and then he would rock back, right? Now George Groves is feinting, changing levels, and his opponent doesn't believe him this time, and he's able to land a jab to the body because he's already set it up. He's already done the work. Feinting him again, and then, man, I wish I could say that guy's name. Gutknecht. feinting him, feinting him right there, and then still eating a jab, right? It's interesting because he feints the jab, and the reason he doesn't throw the jab is because he knows the counter is coming, but he doesn't respect the fact that he knows the jab is coming and make a play around it, right? So he could feint the jab and then give him a straight right hand over the top of Groves' jab, because Groves is so consistent with the counter. And we're gonna watch that, and we're gonna talk about that and how that might wind up being actually a deficit for him, right? So George Groves so far has a great control of his opponent, good feinting, good head movement, and a good counter, right? It doesn't work right here either, right? But one of the problems with him is that he's so predictable with that counter on the counter jab, trying to take away his opponent's lead hand, right? And that's an interesting style, and if it works against Chris Eubank, he's going to be able to mitigate a lot of Chris Eubank's ability to set up his offense and slow his offense down enough that he may be able to outbox him, right, early in the fight and score some rounds, right? The problem that I have with that idea is that it's so consistent that it's every time his opponent throws a jab, he tries to counter it. That Chris Eubank may be able to do exactly what he just did, right? So let's see what he does right here. So he eats the jab to the body because of the active guard. He doesn't know if it's coming or if it's not. George Groves does a good job of controlling him after, just putting his lead hand out there. Shoots that jab, boom, and then he knows that the counter is coming, and he tries to set it up so that he shoots a jab and then comes back with the left hand counter, right? Let's watch Gutknecht again, right? So he sticks his hand out there like it's a jab, right? And he's really trying to set up that left hook right there, but he gets cracked in between by a great 1-2 from George Groves. Now this is going to be something that Chris Eubank Jr. does as well, is start baiting the counter from George Groves, right? And it might work in George Groves' favor in that case, that he's throwing 2 punches because it's going to offset the rhythm, right, of countering the counter. It'll be very interesting, but Chris Eubank is just too talented. He's too fast. He's too athletic for, I think, him to be kind of caught up by that, and I do think he may look for the overhand right over the jab eventually. Some good feints from him. And then again, right off that jab, right, his opponent comes forward with that jab. What does he do? Shoots that 1, shoots that 2, but he goes to the body this time because his opponent has already closed the distance. And his opponent has already shown like an unwillingness to fight on the inside. He just kind of smothers his opponent. I'm not even sure what he's looking to set up, to be honest. But let's kind of look at this. George Groves stays on the line with him that whole time, and that's something that's very worrisome for me because we talked about the Roy Jones Jr. effect, right? This is something that's becoming increasingly popular in boxing, and it was popular a long time ago too, but having those crazy athletic moments, right? Right now we've got Chris Eubank Jr., who's a phenomenal athlete. He's fast, he hits hard, he's got great tools, he throws great punches, he transfers his weight really well, so he's able to get power in all of his shots. Real quick. Jab comes, 1, 2, and he misses, right? He's still looking for his timing, and his opponent knows it's coming, so. But then landing a good right hand on the inside, and this is exactly where I think George Groves is going to have a lot of problems with Chris Eubank, is on the inside, where he can't see those short punches, those inside, that inside style fighting, right? Those really short punches. But also you have Deontay Wilder, who was getting pieced up by Gerald Washington. And in my opinion, he was losing that fight. It looked like he was losing that fight. 1, 2, again over the jab. And then he does a decent job of getting out of there after landing the 1, 2, boom, boom, right? Gets under the hook. But he kind of goes straight back, right? He does control his opponent really well with his lead hand one more time, right? So we'll see it one more time, sorry. Boom. Gets under the right hand, right? And then when he comes up here, he sticks his lead hand out there. And you can see that Ed is looking to set up his punches too, right? By putting his glove out there, measuring, and he's trying to get Groves to make a mistake. But Groves controls him with the lead hand. And Ed says in his mind, oh shit, number 1, I can't see anything. But he might be setting up a right hand too. He doesn't know what's going on. And all that Groves is really doing is controlling him, right? Saying, hey, think about this real quick. Think about this while I skate out of here. But also, you know, Deontay Wilder, how he was able to knock Gerald Washington out, right? After losing basically like all those rounds. You know, I'm not sure exactly how many rounds he was losing, but he definitely didn't look like he was winning that fight. And then he just goes, you know, ape shit and knocks Gerald Washington out. You know, quick stoppage, you know, who knows? It doesn't matter, right? But it's the fact that he can just go crazy and start landing punches, you know? Even how he did to like Bermane Stiverne, right? And that's such an interesting thing. Like in their second fight, you know, sure, Bermane Stiverne was on you know, like 15-month layoff or whatever, 18 months, whatever it was. But after the first knockdown, or the second knockdown, I don't know, Bermane Stiverne gets his guard up, and Deontay Wilder just starts slamming bombs into the side of his head, you know, into his gloves, you know, and he's able to just knock the guy out. And I think that that's something that the conditioning, I don't think that Chris Eubank has any problems with conditioning. He always looks in phenomenal shape. Even after, in the last video, after he throws that flurry of like 20 punches, he's barely even winded standing in front of his opponent. Barely even winded. And I watched that for like 10 times, and I was just like, for real? Most guys, even during the post-fight interview, they're still going to be huffing and puffing after only 3 rounds. They're still going to be fucked up. But, you know, Chris Eubank Jr. after he threw 20 punches right there. And that's something that I think is really worrisome for George Groves. I'm really worried that that Chris Eubank is going to be able to lose every round up to the 3, 4, 5 rounds, and then just run in and kind of knock him out. You know, kind of just throw some bombs like George Groves did against Fedor Chutinov. You know, and George Groves may have been winning the fight with Fedor Chutinov too, but he still wasn't being as effective as he is in this fight. Even countering the jab, you know, and he stayed on the line with Chutinov for so long that he was just kind of getting pieced up, you know. Chutinov was able to throw bombs at him, and Chutinov is not going to be half as fast, half as strong, or half as crafty as Eubank. As Eubank picks his punches really well. I think he does really good work on the inside. Now, originally, I thought the fight was going to be a one-sided beatdown for Chris Eubank. Ooh, again, starting to pick up his timing right here. I thought Chris Eubank was going to smash him. Boom. And he kind of gets cut off. His opponent controls his arm with his arm on accident. But does a good job of moving off the line after. This is something that he's going to need to do all night. 1, 2, boom, and then pivot off the line. Right? So your opponent can't throw punches at you anymore. And that's going to be something he's going to have to do against Chris Eubank Jr. all night long. Move off the line. Move off the line. Every time he throws a punch, he needs to move off the line. But as you can see, George Groves, probably not half the athlete that Chris Eubank is. You know, I do like him. Oh, man, a good job with that 1-2 again. Setting it up, but his opponent, you know, punching with head movement and able to get under the shot. But Groves doing a good job right there, moving off the line yet again. Some good feints. So, like, I like George Groves. You know, I do think he sets his punches up well. I think he thinks about his punches really well. He's got decent ability to stop his opponent from controlling the space between him and his opponent, right? Especially because of the fact that Chris Eubank doesn't feint early in the fights. He feints later in the fights, kind of after he's established his jab, you know, after he's thrown it a lot. And I think that while that might get him in a little bit of trouble early on in the fight, I'm just not sure George Groves has the power to take advantage of that flaw in Chris Eubank's game, right? The fact that he doesn't set his jab up, the fact that he doesn't have an active guard. You know, now one of the interesting things about this is, and again, look at George Groves' active guard, right? Slipping to the inside any second now. Ooh, changing head slots. He's going to duck down here, changing head slots again, slipping, you know, and then he's able to set that jab up, just walk it in there because his opponent doesn't know what he's doing. You know, he's able to hide his punches. Now, this active guard, it serves 2 purposes, right? It hides his punches, but it also hides his head. And Chris Eubank might have some trouble early on in the fight finding George Groves' head. you know, which is probably going to cause him to go to the body. Maybe he'll jab to the body, and that'll allow George Groves to land that 1-2 counter. But early on in the fight, I think I'm giving the advantage to George Groves. But I do think that eventually Chris Eubank is going to knock him out. I do think that. I just get the sense that he's never going to be able to get away from Chris Eubank for the duration of the whole fight. Very similarly to Carl Froch, how he was winning that fight and wound up just getting caught by a punch he just didn't see coming. But I just think that, you know, George Groves stays on the line too much for Chris Eubank not to be able to find him eventually. Again, that 1-2, doing a good job moving off the line right there. But it's really interesting because George Groves looks like he's fighting such a great fight in this fight, right? That 1-2 counter, moving off the line really well, and then he has the fight with Fedor Chutinov and gets stuck on the ropes and gets pounded. He doesn't use that 1-2 counter. You know, maybe George Groves all of a sudden got old. Maybe, you know, I don't know what it is. But just not using those skills as appropriately as he can or as he could in the Chutinov fight. So, and another thing, you know, I'm not talking about it very much, but controlling your opponent after you throw punches, right? These guys are not on that level, you know, Chris Eubank or George Groves. You know, very basic boxing, right? But some good skills in there. You know, I give the skills advantage to George Groves, but I give all the other advantages to Eubank, and I think that those advantages kind of outweigh George Groves' skill advantage. Anyway, we'll keep watching this round. You know, good job right there, setting the counter up again. The jab comes 1, 2, and he's going under now, right? Very smart from George Groves, realizing that the 2 over the top wasn't working, so he tries to walk him into an uppercut, and then he kind of controls him with that left hook while he moves off the line. You know, that left hook not being a real punch, but just an opportunity for him to move off the line. Now this is really interesting. That jab comes, he looks to catch it and parry it away, and then boom, comes in with that uppercut too. Really interesting stuff from George Groves right there. And then tying him up, you know, doing a good job of not staying on the line with this guy. But I just wonder what was going on with him in the fight with Chutinov. You know, maybe he had an injury, maybe, you know, I don't know what. Good job right there. That was beautiful, actually. Ducking that shot, boom, and pivoting off the line and making his opponent reset while he takes the middle of the stage. Great work from him right there. Again, so hard to predict his jab when it's coming because of his active guard, because he's constantly moving. Boom. And I like how he's changed up his rhythm, right? So now he's not throwing that right hand to the head anymore. He's throwing it to the body because his opponent's head movement is too good, right? And I don't want to say head movement. I'm using it in the classical sense, not the appropriate sense. But when he punches, he's changing head slots well enough that George Groves has been having a hard time landing that right hand, right? Now, we talk about head movement. His opponent basically has no head movement, right? His head is in one spot. He only moves his head when he punches, right? Which is why he got hit with that shot and that shot right there, because he doesn't actually have any head movement unless he anticipates a punch coming, right? Whereas Groves, constantly moving his head, that's head movement. But anyway, George Groves doing a good job of kind of schooling this guy, not really allowing his opponent to kind of set up his punches. Interesting. But not really allowing his opponent to set up his punches. But his opponent not being the smartest fighter either, right? Because he knows those counters are coming, so he's not really taking advantage of them either. You know, he's not taking advantage of all the information that he has about George Groves and countering those jabs, those jab counters, and the right hand counters. You know, so like feinting with the jab and then coming in with the left hook like he did earlier was the right idea, but just not committing to the jab as hard as he did, not selling the jab as hard as he did, you know. And that might have gone a long way for him. But anyway, we're just going to let this round play out. We're not going to do a third round. But if you go back and watch the Chudinov fight, there are a lot of problems for George Groves. And I did a film study on that one too. I'm not going to put it up because the whole time I'm just like, all right, any second George Groves he's gonna figure this out. He's gonna do this. He's gonna, and he never does it. And I just kind of look like I was very unprepared, like I was. But if you go back and watch that fight, you see that George Groves for some reason had a very hard time getting off the line with Chudinov. He had a very hard time even countering the jab, which I think is going to be his biggest tool against Chris Eubank. Boom, boom. And his best way to slow down Chris Eubank's offense, to start setting up round wins, and to take away Chris Eubank's jab, because even though Chris Eubank's jab is not his offense is not predicated off of his jab, he does use his jab to set up his punches. And not in necessarily the traditional sense, where I'm talking about where you feint and you probe really well and you make your opponent make a mistake. But he runs in there, throws a 1-2-3, or throws a 1-2, and then he looks at you and he says, oh, when I throw the 1-2 hard, he tries to counter the jab. So now I have the information that he's trying to counter the jab. Even though he committed to the jab, he was ready for a counter already, but eventually he starts finding holes in your game through fighting you, right? Through the experience of being in the fight with you. Now, while that is an effective way to win, and most fighters fight and learn to beat their opponent through that measure of information, right? By just winging punches at your opponent and then finding the openings later. It's a very dangerous style, and that's why I think that George Groves is going to have some success early in the fight, taking advantage of Chris Eubank's jab. And I may be wrong too. Chris Eubank may just be too fast and hit too hard and be too explosive, and he might even just knock George Groves out early in the first round. Who knows? But I am giving the skills and the skills department to George Groves, but I just don't think that he's going to be able to maximize his effort for it. I don't think he's going to move off the line enough, and I think eventually he's going to get caught by Roy Jones Eubank. Eubank is going to catch him with a flurry and be able to put him down. It might even wind up being something that's like an early stoppage, just because Eubank might be the front runner to win the World Boxing Super Series or whatever. Like, it might be some shady stuff. Who knows? Who knows? But anyway, it's going to be a good fight. I'm actually excited to see it now after doing the film study. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And yeah, who are your picks? Did I miss something in George Groves' career? What about Eubank? Did I miss anything in Eubank's career? He looks like a flashy lad, I'll say. But there are definitely some holes in his game that I think that George Groves is going to have a little bit of fun with, all the way up until he gets caught with one of those flurries. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks, guys.